Okay, so hello everyone. Happy Saturday. Hope all is well. Hope you guys can hear me. I know that I'm showing up online unexpectedly, and I'm going to get ready to turn my camera on. Give me 1 second, everyone. Let's see here. And then we're going to begin. I'm not going to stay on long. I just wanted to come on really quickly to do some encouragement. All right, so I hope you all can see me. So hello everyone once again. This is ChesZerae, aka the pretty producer, aka the singing scholar. Hoping that you can hear me once again. So I wanted to just come on and talk a little bit about what we talked about prior the last time I was on. I had to look back to see. I was on probably about a week ago, and we were talking about transition, talking a lot about transition. And so I wanted to just place some extra emphasis on that. Hopefully, you all will be encouraged. I know we're going into a new week. So I hope that your weekend is going well and that this particular piece of encouragement that's linked to transition will help you to maybe see some things differently. I always emphasize that you don't have to agree with everything that I say. We are all here online, obviously, with different types of thoughts, opinions, and things that we share with others. But what's been on my heart literally for quite some time is this whole, situation and thought about transition. And I'll explain what transition is. So some of you will know based off life experience, we do this all the time, where we're experiencing challenges or differences or growth. Sometimes they're not always challenges. It could be things that are very, very positive, right? But they're new, they're different. Oh, you've never been here before, or you've never experienced this before, or you've never tried this before, or you've never encountered this before. So, all of those things are like in the category of transition. And so, with that being said, I wanted to encourage you if you're experiencing that, like when it comes to change, things that are very different that you've never seen before, never experienced before, count it all joy. Count it as adding a skill set of courage to your skill set, literally, because when you are going through things that are new, it will require sometimes a new level of courage. And so, oftentimes, when I cross paths with a lot of people, it's a common struggle that we all get into sometime, which is courage. Is sometimes there's a lack of courage that's present. And so, I wanted to emphasize that courage is not it's not always built, overnight, but it's just something that you still have to develop. And it's still something that's so beautiful that will get you through certain types of transitions. Um when it comes to, I don't know, it could be a change when it comes to like maybe your social life. I hear a lot of people, especially these days, they're thinking about maybe changing who they socialize with, who they like to socialize with. And so sometimes with that transition, you may find that maybe there's some things you're discovering that you like, that you value. Maybe you don't value this anymore. Maybe this is a new value you're taking on. Maybe it's a new interest and you want to be around, maybe others who have that same interest. And I'm using this just as a very basic example. So what does that have to do with courage? It really takes courage to come out of a lot of things that are familiar. So what do we often do, right? We get very comfortable in our familiarity. We get comfortable into old places, things that seem to work and they're very consistent. And so when it comes to transition, sometimes you'll find that anything that you have once known to be consistent, it literally becomes inconsistent. And most people, not all, but most people are going to react and they can become fearful because it's changing the comfort zone. And so when it comes to gaining courage and entering into a new zone that may be temporarily uncomfortable, I think really the goal is just don't flight or don't give up during that turning point. So when you get to a place of where things are becoming a little more familiar or a little more comfortable, know that that takes steps and it takes time. A lot of us will want to back out as soon as something feels, it feels unfamiliar or it feels like it's getting too difficult, or as I like to put it, when the fire is getting a little hotter. And so it's like what I'm trying to basically emphasize is that sometimes we have to be willing to go through times of discomfort to get to that new comfort. And we do live in a world where a lot of people are looking for so many shortcuts. We're looking for, a lot of these glamorous walks, glamorous results, and they don't come that way. So when it comes to courage, sometimes you have to take time to build that. Build it privately. A lot of the times courage and even faith, they're tied together. So when you have faith, you're believing for things that, you don't see. And in order to build courage, sometimes it's just small increments of even how we speak. So, hence, this is speak life, right? So, I encourage people to speak life into those things that you want to see occur. So, if you're looking to say, well, I want to be more courageous, I want to experience this life transition with as much uh, accommodation that I can have. Sometimes you just have to start by speaking that. You ever notice that sometimes if you keep repeating things or you keep hearing things, you might end up repeating it? Think about, for example, how, especially those of us that are very familiar with online activity, you might hear a lot of trends. Like people have different types of famous phrases or common phrases. And then you might start to repeat these phrases after a while because you hear them. But one thing that really dawned on me for this, for the entirety of this year so far is that I wonder, what are we speaking to ourselves behind closed doors when people are not seeing you, when they're not hearing you? What are you saying to yourself? And do you know that you're one of the primary role players when it comes to transition in your life? So sometimes we can be the people or the individual, we can make our transitions difficult by losing courage, being pessimistic, or rather being negative. And so, even though, like I said, some things can be very uncomfortable initially when you're going through different types of life changes, it's so important to emphasize about having the right mindset. I always emphasize when it comes to mindset that it's a lifestyle. That's why I said these things starts in increments. They start small. And the reason why a lot of times I'm passionate to speak about speaking life or to talk about being bold or to talk about being courageous, because a lot of people come to me and they always ask me like, "Oh, how do you gain courage to do this? How do you gain boldness to do this?" And honestly speaking, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. So everything in me, I'm drawn to serve God. And God is who gives me that strength, gives me the boldness, gives me the courage, the enthusiasm to want to do things, to want to pursue, even through life transitions, even when things are not going smooth or even when things are not going so easy. And so I share that with people because that's the only answer that I know is plausible in my life, that actually is doable in my life, and it shows up in my actions. And so when I tell people, like, certain things are a lifestyle, I don't become bold overnight. Honestly speaking, a lot of you may know of me and my stories, they can be a bit, bold and outgoing and things like that. And a lot of these things didn't just start overnight. It took years, decades in the making to decide, to make a decision, to desire to be bold, to desire to be open for change. And so again, even when change hurts, we all will not necessarily embrace change the same way, but there's still something wonderful about embracing the change in the way, in the level where you are. So every time someone does ask me that type of question, my goal is to say to you, start at the level where you are, because we all have this ongoing development. And that is the purpose of transition. Because think about it, if things were always the same, I'm talking about like literally all the same throughout our lives, the rest of our lives, where is that opportunity for growth? Where is the opportunity to have what I like to refer to as a training ground, right? A training ground for better beginnings, a training ground for new efforts. Because when you're not challenged, you don't go higher, you don't go further. And so sometimes I mentioned like the example of social life, for example. I I can say, personally speaking, throughout the years of my life, there are many times where I had to, maybe rotate my social circles a little bit because there was growth that was taking place, or there was a boldness of wanting more, and not necessarily, saying that, oh, a certain social circle is not good enough per se. Definitely not that. But just understanding and identifying, like, wherever you're going, that's where you want to associate. That's where you want to be aligned. And so, like I said, that comes with time. It comes with grace. It comes with being even graceful of how you approach things. I think that, and I always use online as an example, the kind of social media influences that we have a lot of times will really influence you to sometimes, just come off very disrespectful when it comes to wanting to leave a thing or change interest or do this and do that. And it's just such a, just a nasty approach behind all of that. Because again, you don't have to necessarily have an attitude towards transition. Sometimes it's just really sitting back, taking it again one day at a time to figure out, what are the pros and the cons? And how can I approach something with a graceful answer as opposed to, something that comes off cold or something that comes off very rebellious? Because even if we are saying no to something and we're desiring something better, it doesn't mean that you have to express it in a certain way. Now, am I saying that the whole world needs to change and be like that? I mean, it would be ideal, but again, this is what makes the world go round. There are different walks of life, different people, different opinions, different thoughts, patterns, you name it. But I'm just speaking to those that can resonate with what it means to, when you're going through a certain transition, you can still carry through this transition with grace. You can still carry through this transition with some enthusiasm, even if you don't know what's next. A lot of the times, you're not going to know what's next. You're not always going to be given the fine details. You're not going to always know exactly the day to day of what's going to happen. But one thing I can assure you that I'm learning and I have learned is that the mindset. So if you're coming in with a mindset of understanding that in spite of, despite of different things that are occurring, I'm deciding to keep a mindset of courage. I'm deciding to keep a mindset of being open to change. I'm keeping a mindset of embracing change. And you'll be surprised when our words have that much power so that we can see things happen, see things come into that type of transition. Okay. So I wanted to keep this really brief and I wanted to just put that out there. So hopefully you all can start off your week with that type of encouragement. So this is your girl, ChesZerae, AKA the pretty producer, AKA the singing scholar. And I want to thank you so much for just taking this time to just hear a moment of Speak Life. And I will be back. I just don't have these exact times in place yet, but